Okay, welcome back to part 2 of the seats, and in this video we'll be focusing on the piping and the front seat hinges. First off, what I did for the piping. In the last video I said I was concerned about using the CA, which by the way, I'm just using this old bottle of CA. I don't think I said that very clearly in the last video because somebody commented and asked what kind of glue I was using, and I'm like, I thought I said, but apparently I didn't. So CA, and I like this for the leather because it holds very well, and it grabs quickly enough that I don't have to hold it on there for a long time waiting for it to dry. So it's almost instant and it holds tight, so that's why I use this. You just got to be careful with this because if you get it on your fingers and you touch the leather, it's going to cure almost instantly, and then when you pull your finger off, it's going to pull the coating of the leather off and leave a mark, and you have to redo it. So you got to be careful, of course. So for the piping, I didn't want to use the CA, so I went out and I bought this, and I picked this specifically because it says Ultimate, and it was $2 more expensive than the bottle right next to it that had a less fancy label. And and it says superior strength. But the main reason is water cleanup, because I want to be able to wipe up any excess or ooze out or mistakes with water and not damage, or with the damp cloth and not damage the leather. So what I did, before I just put this on the seat, I did some experiments. And so I took a scrap piece of leather, and I don't know how well it's going to show up on the camera, but I basically just brushed on a line of that glue from that mark to that mark, and I just let it dry. I didn't wipe it up, I just let it dry. And you can see it, not bad though. It was thicker here, so it shows up more. Down here, you can still just barely see it, but I wanted to make sure that it dried clearish and that it dried at the same sheen as the leather itself. In other words, I didn't want it to be shinier than the leather, and I didn't want it to be duller than the leather. And just looking at that light shine across there, the light stops right there where that glue is. So it's actually not as shiny as the leather is. But it's almost not noticeable. So what that tells me is when I have that piping along here, if I had just a tiny bit of ooze out that didn't get cleaned up, it wouldn't really be that noticeable. And what I did here then, from that mark to that mark, I put another bead of glue, but this time I wiped it off with a damp towel. I just wanted to make sure it was not going to leave any kind of a stain. And as best as I can tell, there was no stain or anything left over. So when you wipe it off, it's completely gone. It does not leave any kind of mark on the leather at all. So that's good. That's what I wanted to see with this stuff. The other thing I did was I glued a couple of pieces of the piping onto another scrap piece of leather just to see how tightly it holds. This one I marked, I actually sanded the back side of the piping just to give it some tooth for the glue to set in. I wanted to see if it makes a difference if you sand it or not and how tightly it holds. And you know, with any glue you use, if you grab a loose edge and just pull, you can pull it off. So I wanted to see how easily they would come off if you accidentally hit it or rubbed it with a fingernail. Like if somebody was moving the seat and they caught it with a fingernail, I wanted to see how easily it would come off, and that one came off pretty easy. So that came off pretty easy. The one I did not sand came off pretty easy. So that's not a good sign. This one is holding better, but that's actually holding pretty well. So I think the key is, see how well it pulls. You know, you can pull it off obviously, but nobody's going to be grabbing it and pulling on it, hopefully. It's not bad. It's not bad. I was hoping it would be a little bit stronger, but honestly, I mean, it's not that bad. I might experiment with some more glues, some different glues. I don't know. That's still in the air as far as what kind of glue I'm going to use for this. But that's not bad. That's definitely an option. It took a little bit of effort to get that off. But so not as good as I was hoping for, but I think okay. So now let's get back to these seats, the hinges. In the last video, I fully intended on explaining why these hinges go this way and not this way, the way you would think they would go, because that's where that hinge lines up. And that's originally the way I thought they went. And I was going to explain that very thoroughly last video because I knew that it was going to look like I was putting them on wrong. And somebody did comment to point out that I was putting them on wrong. And I replied back and explained, no, it's not. And I would explain it in more detail in this video. And first off, if you see me doing something wrong, please call me out on it. Let me know. Because I would like a chance to correct any mistake that I make. The only problem with YouTube videos like this is by the time you realize I made a mistake, it's already done. And it's a lot of times it's hard to go back and correct that. With this one, I haven't done it yet, so it would have been a good call out. I could have fixed it. But for this example, the commenter was not correct. So let me show you why. So when you look at the original kit part, that hinge is kind of molded on. And it has two long legs. There's no long leg and a short leg. It's just two long legs. But it looks like, it looks like that, kind of. It's just that the one is a little bit longer than the other. Right? So it looks like that's what they were going for. And when you look at the bottom seat, where that goes on, that goes in just like that. So you would think that these new hinges would go on like that. And that's what I thought. And that's what the commenter told me, that it should go like this, not the way I was doing it. But the problem is, when you put them on this way, when you try to fold the seat back down, it pulls it down into that lower seat cushion. And this is a problem I ran into on the other one that I did a few years ago, to where when I put it together, first off, with the springs in, there just wasn't room to put this. You're supposed to squeeze the springs. You're supposed to compress the springs on that bottom seat cushion down so it'll slip under that. But that puts a lot of tension on that leather. And then when you close it, again, it pulls that seat down into the cushion, so there's no room for it. Even if I put this one in, there's no room for the seat cushion itself, for the top seat cushion. And so if we put this one on like this, so if we did put that one on, as soon as you go to close it or fold it down, it hits. You can't go any more than that. It can fold back all the way, but it just can't go down any at all. And so that hinge geometry doesn't work. So if you put it on like this, where you would think, and then you put this one on like this, the seat cannot fold down. It can flip back, but it cannot fold down because it hits that bottom seat. It doesn't work. So when you put it on this way, like this, and then you attach that to the seat, it's kind of hard to hold that together. When it's like this, then it could pivot all the way down like that, hinging on this one right here. So it can go from here to here. Again, I'm not holding it together very well, but you get the idea. It goes like this. So when I first started looking at this, of course, I started trying to figure out the geometry the way you would think it goes, like this, the way I thought, and it wasn't working. So I went to Model Motorcars website and I looked at the pictures, and so take a look at these pictures. So this is the photo from their website, and you can see the arms, and you can see that the longer side is down with the short side up. But there's no instructions on their website for how to put those on. I mean, it looks like they just put bolts in, but that one corner, I mean, there's not a lot of material for that bolt to go through. I don't know, if they drilled into the resin of the seat back and put the bolt in, or if it's just kind of glued onto the back of the seat. But in either case, it doesn't really look too strong, I guess. I mean, it looks kind of weak there. So I'm not sure how they attach that, but take a look at this other picture. So this is a picture of the real car, also on their website, on the same website. And now that you can see that one corner, that back corner, looks like it hinges onto another post that goes up into the back of the seat back. And so the actual hinge is not on the seat, it's on another piece sticking down from the bottom of the seat. Hopefully that makes sense. But, and maybe that's to allow it to fold back on the real car, not really sure. But I'm going to try to duplicate that a little bit better, and I think it'll fit better and work better. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of brass, and I'm going to do kind of what I mentioned. I thought about it, and I think this is the best way. I'm just going to make an extension piece, and that will bolt onto it right about there. And that's going to look like the picture that we just saw. And then it should hinge perfectly fine. So that's the plan. Let me get some pieces made for that. So I'll get back with you here in just a little bit. Okay, so I did some more tests with some glue and the piping. I did try the UV curable, and that worked about as well as the wood glue. It still just kind of peeled off easily. So then I tried with the CA, and with the CA, when I peel that off, it's actually peeling off the leather coating itself, which is as good as you can get. I mean, it's peeling off the leather. So that's as strong as bond as you can really get with that slight of a surface contact area. But it still didn't take much more effort than the wood glue on the sanded surface. So I'm kind of thinking with such little surface area, you're just not going to get like a really super strong, tight bond. I mean, the CA is best, but it's only a tiny bit better than the wood glue. So I actually started with the CA on this seat, and I masked off a little bit, and I applied the CA with a little needle and a pin vise, just very carefully trying to apply it only where I need it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the rest of it with the wood glue. I'm going to sand the bottom edge of the remainder of that. I'm going to with a sanding stick. So I'll just sand the bottom edge with what's left here, and I'll go in with the wood glue, and I'll put it down in there, wiping off the excess with a damp towel. I'll use little pieces of tape to tape it down and hold it in position until it's fully dry, and that's what I'm going to do. Now, when I get to that far end, I might put a little tack of CA just to keep that from wanting to come off. But keep in mind, this is setting down in like a little groove formed by the folded edge. So it is going to be getting more surface area than the test I did here, where it was just flat on the surface. So it's still going to be better. But I just can't risk putting CA all the way around here on all the seats and not tearing up the leather. So that's what I'm going to do here as far as the piping goes. So, and again, it's not hard. It's just tedious, and I think once I use a water-based glue that I can wipe off any excess and not worry about damaging the leather, I'll have a better go at it. So that's the plan for that one, and I'm still debating the hinge. I think I know what I'm doing. I'm going to do what I said earlier, so that's probably the plan for that. I just have to sand off a little here just to make sure that is brass. I'm sure it's brass. It's got to just be chrome-plated brass. And then solder a piece on there, and then that should be good to go. So anyways, let me get some more work done here, and I'll get back to you here in just a minute. Okay, so there's that seat done with the piping, and yeah, I just used the wood glue all along here. I did put a little bit of CA right on that back corner just to kind of lock it down so it wouldn't pop off. I'm thinking as long as the corners don't pop loose, then it won't peel off. Since that's kind of tucked down into a corner, I really don't think it's going to get knocked loose. You would have to really get a fingernail in there and pull on it to knock that loose, which probably shouldn't happen. But if it does, all you got to do is get a little bit of glue under it with a toothpick and push it back down and tape it till it dries. So anyways, there's that one done. And as far as I'm concerned, this back seat is done, minus the screws back in hinges and putting it in the car. So this part's done. Now back to the hinges. This is chrome-plated brass. I found that out because I sanded the chrome off on that side. And I cut a little strip of brass, and I drilled it, and I put an 080 bolt through it. I don't know how well that's focusing. I put an 080 bolt through it with a nut on the back side with some Loctite, and I soldered them together. And those are now locked. Those cannot pivot. The bolt is primarily just there for decorative purposes. And I guess if the solder joint cracks, which, I mean, why would it? But if the solder joint cracks, the bolt will keep it from just falling apart. And so that will get recessed in like that. Because again, in the photos, it looks like there's a piece coming down with a hole, and then that part gets bolted to it. So I'll recess in here, bond that in like that, and then that will get mounted onto the seat frame like that. Then this can pivot this way. Make sense? Just like that. So that's the plan. So the only thing is I'm going to have to bond that in, making sure that both sides are perfect so it's not twisted or crooked or anything like that. And when I do the leather, I'm going to have to be leathering it with that in there like that, and I'm just going to have to put the leather over top of it. So, so I'll recess them so they fit, then I'll do this, then I'll bond those in, then I'll put the leather on the sides and the back, and that should be it. That should be good. Okay, so I started covering that seat in the leather, and I still need to trim right to there. And I'm still trying to decide where I want to trim that edge. I don't know yet if I want to cut it right at the peak or if I want to fold it down and cut just a little bit down here. That's probably what I'll do. I still have to figure that out. The bottom I just went ahead and took right back to that edge here. And you'll notice I cut out some pockets here for these hinges. And so I have both of these done now. So there's what those are looking like, front and back. So I cut those pockets out for those hinges to fit in, and that brass fits in that pocket nice and flush. So when I put the leather on that side, you won't see anything there, hopefully. And that sits down like that. I might need to move it up just a little bit. We'll just have to see how that fits. So it might be more here. We'll just kind of have to see how that goes. which that is the next step. So I'm going to have to decide where I want the seat. Now, if you look at the photos on their website, it's right about just like that. I don't think I want it any more forward or back. I think right about there's about right. And so then I just have to decide the best place to put that. And so what I can do then, you'll notice there's a hole in it. There's a countersunk hole in it. And that is for one of these screws to lock it in this way. So what I can do, what I'm going to do, I will hold that in with some CA, just a little bit, in case it's not right. I can break it off and try again. You know, just make sure I get the angle this way correct. And then once I got a good fit to the seat, and I also need to drill some holes. I also need to drill some holes for that hinge to go into the base. So once I have it fitting properly and folding properly and positioned properly, then I can drill through here, put the screw in, and then that'll be set. And then once that's in for good, I can then cover the sides here and the back with the leather, and then that'll be done. But I think what I'll do before I bond those in, I think I'll go ahead and figure out how I want to trim that, just so that edge isn't in the way. So let me get those trimmed and the hinges fit, and I'll get back to you here in just a second. Okay, so let's take a look at what I've got done so far. Here is the seat back with the arms on it. I have one side on it. Here's what the other side looks like. Now, remember when I pocketed out the little corner so that the brass piece could fit in flush? Well, that was a mistake, because I did not take into account that the seat back is wider than the seat bottom by the thickness of the plastic and the thickness of the leather. So when I went to test fit those on, there was a wide gap. And so, well, let me rephrase. When I test fit the arms onto the seat bottom, there was a wide gap on the seat back. So I had to fill that gap in. I had to fill in what I milled out, plus a piece of plastic. Plus there's a screw, and this is solid. That's not going anywhere now. So in order to make that match up with this, what you do is you cut some styrene. Now this is still way oversized. That has to be trimmed back. But the corner will get cut out like that to fit over top here. And my styrene is a little bit too thin, so I'm having to double up on the styrene. So 2 pieces of the styrene, and then the leather will go right over top of that. And you can see how that looks here. So there's the 2 pieces of styrene, and the cutout around here, the leather goes right around, and that's what that's looking like. I still need to trim that up a little bit and make that look a little bit neater. But that's what that's looking like. And that styrene, since it is doubled up, what I did and what I'm going to do with this one is this edge gets sanded about that much, gets beveled down to about half of the total thickness here. So at the edge, it's the same thickness as 1 piece of styrene. And what that does, it gives a little bit of shape to the side. That way it's not just perfectly flat. It's got a little bit of shape to it. So in my opinion, it looks a little more cushiony, I guess you could say. But that'll get folded back and trimmed off to probably right about there. And then a back piece put on, and then that'll be done. One thing I forgot to do, but I will do, I'm going to go in with some silver paint. And I'm going to touch up the brass Anything that looks brass will get touched up with silver paint. I can still do that here because I haven't glued that down yet. So that'll get touched up with silver paint so it's not as brassy, noticeable looking. But in my mind, that looks more like the real car. And you know, I was thinking about this. Looking back at that photo, I still don't understand the intended way that they want you to put these on. I'm kind of thinking that maybe in that photo, they just glued the seat back right to the seat bottom so it can't move. They just glued it on there. And then they took the hinges and just glued them on. I don't know. But you can also see that I drilled a hole here so that when you put these on, and also, sorry, I patched the hole. I patched the original kit hole here and here. I drilled a hole here and I slotted it. We'll see why here in just a second. And I cut out the leather here and here, and that's right in line with those holes so that the bolts go in. These bolts are stainless steel 080. They're 080 stainless steel bolts. They go in just like that. So now, when I put those in, I can just go into the bottom with some CA, and that'll lock those bolts in, and it'll also help hold the seat to the base. But as you can see, if we get these bolts in, like that, and we'll go ahead and get the other one in here. Like that. So there's the seat. And it can fold forward just like that. And I am happy with that. I think it looks nice. All I got to do is finish up. And again, so seat gets glued in. Glue goes in here, holding the bolts in. And I'm thinking that's like the best way to do it. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. If you're the person who designed these and you're looking at this thinking, I completely missed it, please let me know. I mean, I'm not going to change what I did because I think it looks good and it looks good, but I would love to know the intended function of these hinges. Obviously, I still need to put the piping in. And right here, obviously, I need to put the piping in along here. For these edges, basically what I did was I taped off. I just put a piece of tape here around it, so it left me the edge I wanted, and I just went under the sharp blade and cut right on the edge of that tape. And these plastic pieces, you need to make sure that they fit in. Obviously, that doesn't fit right yet. I still have to sand the corner here, and I have to shape the bottom here and cut that out. But you need to make sure that that fits perfectly right up against that leather with just the tiniest of gap, so that when you wrap it and you stick it in, it fills that edge in, and it leaves you a nice, you want a nice little, what's what I'm looking for? Crook? Crevice? Crack? You want a nice little crevice all the way around there for that piping to set in. But I'm thinking that's looking pretty good. So all I got to do is one more side and the back, and then, and obviously I need to paint that flat, or I need to paint that gloss black. So that gets painted. And then these seats will be pretty much done. I am still waiting for the hinges for the other seat for this one. I got to do all of that to this one as well. So I'm waiting for the hinges for that. I started wrapping the back. So there's the back in progress. And I also went ahead and did these two pieces. Those go behind the doors, on the sidewall behind the doors. There's what the back looks like. What I do is I glue the long edges first, and then I cut the corners to where they'll just barely wrap around, and then stick some glue in the corners and just push them over, push them down. If you end up with too much material and it puckers and makes a big hump, all you got to do is take a scalpel, slice that off, put some CA on it, and wipe it smooth, and done. So that's those. And I started with the side pieces that go in front of the door. There's one of them. These hold that piece right there that sticks out the side of the body in front of the door. So those go in front of the door on the inside. That still needs to be wrapped around. So working on those. But yeah, we're getting there. We're almost done with the leather. So let me get these finished. Let me get these all done and installed, and we'll come back and show you what they look like. Okay, I got this seat all done. All the piping is on. There's the back. I got the piping all along the back and the sides and the seat bottom. And there's where I put the CA in the bottom to lock the bolts in. And so we get the pivot like this. And I am very pleased with that. I don't think I could have done a better job. So I'm happy with that. So with the piping, if you'll remember, when I was doing the back seat here, I used wood glue. And that worked, and the wood glue will be perfectly fine, but I kind of trust CA a little bit better. I mean, when I did the test, it was only a tiny bit stronger. So the wood glue would have been fine, but for whatever reason, when I did this, I went ahead and just did CA. And remember, I was really concerned about CA with screwing up the leather. So I figured out a way to do it with minimal risk, I think. I was able to do all of this without any issues. And so I'll show you how I did that on the other seat. Now I'm still waiting for the hinges. So this seat, I'm just going to leave it like this until I get the other hinges. I guess I could trim it and make the side pieces, but you know, I can't really go too much further on that one. But here's the seat bottom for the other side. And I'm in the process of putting the piping on this one. I've got it about halfway around almost. And so what I'm doing, I'm using a little pin vise with a tiny little drill bit in it. And I've got just a little container that's just a little glass thing. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but it's nice for holding small amounts of stuff. And I just put some aluminum tape on it so I don't get glue hardened up in that. That's all this is. So just a little container to hold the CA, and I've got that about half full of CA. And so what I do is I dip the drill bit into the CA, and then I wipe off the edges because I don't want a big drip hanging off of it. And I'll show you that here in a second. Now, right now this is dry. I'm not going to do this for real because my eyesight's not good enough to do it through the camera. Because honestly, when I'm doing this, I have to use this thing. Now, I was trying this because this gives me a 10x magnification. This only comes with a 3x as the highest. But with this, the problem with using one of these is you're only using one eye, so you kind of lose depth perception. So when you're bringing two things together, it's easy to miss. And I don't want to take any chances of that with this. So I'm using this. 3x magnification is plenty. I'm able to see perfectly fine with this. So this has really been a huge help for doing this. But I just kind of want to show you the process. First off, obviously you got to get the beginning started. But what you do is you kind of just hold this out of the way, and you get CA on the drill bit. And again, you don't want a big drip hanging off of it. You want that evenly coated. So if you have a big drip hanging off of it and then you put it on here, that big drip is going to make a big spot. And you're going to have a harder time cleaning that up. So what you want is the drill bit evenly coated, and you bring it in here to where the seam is, and you just kind of lay that drill bit down along that seam, and that'll put a fine line of CA, and only do maybe 1/2 inch at a time. So get that coated with CA, and then you just press this down. You just press that down, and I would also use a little paper towel just to keep wiping and pressing. What you do not want to do, you do not want to just push that down and hold it, because if there's any ooze out, it's going to glue your finger to the leather, and when you pull your finger off, it's going to screw up the leather. So don't do that. Same thing with the paper towel. Don't push and hold it, because then you'll glue the paper towel to the leather. What I've been doing is when I get any ooze out, as soon as I lay it down, I take one finger and I wipe along and then off. I don't rest it on there. Then I'll use the other finger, do the same thing, then another finger, and then I'll use the paper towel, and I'll just keep wiping it until it's stuck and all the ooze out is wiped off. If you keep moving, you'll be fine. But as soon as you stop, as soon as you put something on and hesitate and stop, you've just glued it to that. You're going to screw it up. And I've found that even with, because a few times I got more ooze out than I wanted, but by doing that, simply by wiping it off with one finger, and you can tell I've got residue on there, but after it dries, it's fine. So wipe it off. Don't go back with the same one, because then you have wet CA on here possibly, and then you just restuck it. So wipe it once, again, and then with a paper towel, and just keep wiping it till all the ooze out is removed and it's stuck. And what you can do is once the ooze out's removed, you can just kind of put a piece of tape on it beyond where you've glued, because again, you don't want to risk gluing the tape on it. So put the tape on it beyond where you've glued just to keep it from lifting, and just let it set for a few minutes. The CA doesn't take long to grab. And then you just lift up and you go down another 1/2 inch or so until you get all the way to the end. Obviously, you want to leave yourself more than you need. Clip off the excess and then tack down the end. So that's the way I've been doing it, and it's been coming along nicely. And I guess I was kind of concerned over nothing about getting ooze out with the CA, because like I said, if you wipe it off before it dries, you don't see it. It's gone. But trust me, you do not want to glue your finger to it. So don't stop or pause or hesitate. Wipe it, and then paper towel. I know I've said that a bunch of times now, but if you glue your finger to it, you're going to screw it up. And if that happens, you've got 3 choices. Well, if you're building it for yourself, you've got 3 choices. And that is, you can ignore it and let it go, or you can peel it off and redo the leather, or you might be able to find some leather dye that matches. This is not a perfect match. For tiny little spots, this is okay, but if I did a big spot, you would see this. But tiny little spots, you don't notice. So if you get a leather dye that matches, that could fix it. Now, if you're building it for somebody else, you only have 2 options. Redo it or dye it. If you're building for somebody else, you don't want to just leave a spot, because that would look bad on you as a builder. And plus, the person you're buying it, or the person you're building it for, would not be happy with it. So, but if you're doing it for you and you're okay with a blemish, then you do you. But and if you are concerned about not being able to use the CA without screwing up the leather, the wood glue, like I said, it works. And it's this stuff here. It works. It's just a tiny bit weaker than the CA. That's all. Now, let me show you something here real quick. When you dip this, I try to get an even coating on the entire drill bit. Now, if I just left it like that, there's a large drop hanging off of that, and you don't want that. For one, it could drip off and land where you don't want it. So you just wipe that off till there's no big drops, but that tip or that drill bit is evenly coated with CA. So you just put that in the seam and wipe it along the seam, or drag it along the seam, and you're good to go. But again, if you let that drip onto the leather, you're kind of screwed. But anyway, so what I have left to do, I need to finish the piping on this one. I need to finish this one once I get the new hinges in, and then reassemble the same way I did this. But again, there is the finished, or that's what a finished seat looks like. And again, it can fold forward. And like I said, I'm very pleased with that. So I'm going to end this video here because I think it's been way too long. So until next time, thanks for watching.